stole these feet on September the 3rd, 1838. I am so thankful that my soon-to-be wife, Anna, assisted me in my escape. On that train with that eagle as my pass, I made it to New York City. Never seen such a big city in my life. I made it to a gentleman's home by the name of Mr. Ruckles. He took me in. He sheltered me, and he allowed me to stay overnight. I was surprised when I came down to the parlor after a healthy sleep to see my Anna sitting in the parlor. Right away, he rushed us out and told us to go north. When we got to New Bedford, we were welcomed in by the Johnsons. Sitting at that table and drinking coffee that his beautiful wife had prepared for us, right away he says, "We need to give you a name." Ladies and gentlemen, if you notice how I began, I did not say my name. My name, Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. Sitting at this breakfast table, this gentleman said, "We're going to give you a new name." The new name turned out to be Frederick Johnson. Now please understand, ladies and gentlemen, that name was a very captive name, reasoning because the majority of blacks in New Bedford at the time, their last name was Johnson. And being a Johnson made them an easy prey for the slave catchers. Fortunately, Mr. Johnson, a black man, he said, "Frederick, we're going to give you another name." As a matter of fact, I saw this play, Lady of the Lake. And in that play, there was a gentleman by the name of Douglas. He said this name probably would be fitting for you. I said, "I will take that name, but I won't take it as Douglas with one S. I will take it with two S, so that when they pronounce my name, it will have a ring, such as Douglas." So, my name forever at that point became Frederick Douglass. Let me go back a little bit. I was born February the 14th, 1818, on the Tuckahoe in eastern Maryland, on the Lord's Plantation. The Lord's Plantation was the richest plantation in the state of Maryland. 500 slaves. My mother, Harriet Bailey, I never had the opportunity to meet my mother, but I did have the opportunity to feel my mother. What do I mean to feel? Well, she would come 12 miles away 3 times a week in the pit of the dark, knowing that she had to be back on her plantation by the break of dawn the next morning. But she would render herself through the woods with no shoes on to come to see her little Freddie. And when she would get there, she would rock me to sleep. As a matter of fact, she would sing a song that she made up on the spot, "My Little Valentine." Well, like I said, I never got the chance to meet my mother, but I did get a chance to feel my mother on that plantation. My grandmother, Betty Bailey. As some of you may know, that back in the slave days, women, they took care of their master's family. And that's what my grandmother, Betty Bailey, did. She took care of my master's family, and allow me to throw this in as well. When my master was a little boy, she changed my master's clothing, washed my master, bathed my master, and taught my master. Ladies and gentlemen, when my master became a man, he also became my father, Captain Aaron Anthony. He had a daughter, Lucretia. Lucretia got married to Mr. Hugh Ard, or I'll back up, Mr. Thomas Ard, and she became Lucretia Ard. The odd thing about that, and the good thing about it is that she did not know that I was her little brother. So, that allowed me to be treated a little different than most of the slaves. To say that, I remember one day, she summons me to the big house. "Frederick," she hollered. "Yes, master. Yes, ma'am. I need you to go up on the second floor of the big house, and I need you to get in that bath water." Bath water? Yes, the bath water. Ladies and gentlemen, prior to this moment, the only bath water I ever saw up until my 7th year of life was the water down in the pond. That water was the same water that slave mothers would use to wash dishes, if you will, wash clothes, and you would see animals washing in that same water. Ladies and gentlemen, I had 7 years of dirt packed on me. Now you can imagine going up and seeing that tub full of clear water. What did I do? I didn't just step in it, I dived in it. And when I dived in it, I stayed in it. So much so that Miss Lucretia, an hour later, was screaming, "Frederick, get out that water, you've been in there too long." But I said it was too good. I never wore a pair of shoes, I never wore a pair of pants nor a shirt, just a gown. After getting out that water, I was presented a pair of pants, a pair of shoes, and a shirt. And Miss Lucretia told me that I was going to a city called Baltimore. I was going to Baltimore to be the child slave of Mr. Thomas Ard and his wife. They loaded me up on a carriage and we went on to Baltimore. When we got to Baltimore, Bell's Point, I could see it just as bright as day getting off that carriage, and on the front door were 3 people standing there. Mr. Ard, Miss Sophia Ard, and little Tommy. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may suspect, a slave is not allowed to look white folks in the eye or in the face. I'm just a 7-year-old kid. As I'm making my way down the pathway to them, and I get a little closer, Miss Sophia, she shouts out, "Freddie, welcome. We love to have you here." I've never heard white folks talk to a slave like that. And she also said, "Freddie, look at me." I said to myself, this white lady must want to kill me. I'm not going to look her in her face. When I got close enough, she put her hand under my chin and she lifted me up. When I came up with my eyes closed as such. And she said, "Freddie, open your eyes." I said again to myself, I'm not going to die today. I'm not going to open my eyes. And she said, "Freddie, open your eyes, I demand it." When I opened up my eyes, ladies and gentlemen, I saw her big blue eyes, her cherry cheeks, and big white teeth that seemed like they last forever. She took me in, and after maybe about a month of living there, I would tell you a big secret. The secret is, Miss Sophia, she had trouble reading. So every now and then, she'd be in the living room reading. One particular day, she called me in. "Freddie, come in, Freddie, have a seat." I was going to sit on the floor. She said, "No, sit on the couch." And we would be teaching each other how to read. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a moment in my life. As a slave, we're not allowed to read. Well, one particular day, we were reading, and all of a sudden, the front door opened up. It was Master Hugh Ard. And he saw what happened. He screamed and shouted out to Miss Sophia, Miss Sophia, don't you be teaching those black boys how to read. You teach them how to read, and they're going to want to put us in slavery." She says, "Hugh, I didn't know that." Well, guess what, y'all? He came and he stood in front of me. Immediately, I bowed my head, and he was saying, "Freddie, you're not here to read. Don't never let me catch you reading again." You know what I said. I said, "Master, I don't like reading. I'm never going to read again. Reading is bad." Well, I'll have you know, that's what came out my mouth, but they had opened up a new door in my mind. Every time her son, their son, little Tommy went to school, he came home with books. When the family disappeared, I went up to Tommy's room and I began to read. They would send me to the store. Ladies and gentlemen, I would go to the kitchen, break up bread, put it in my pocket. And I would skip down to the store. There were white kids down there, poor white kids. Those white kids, I would give them bread, they would give me lessons. And I would took that knowledge, and I took that money also that the family paid me a penny every time I went to the store. I took those pennies after saving them up, and I bought my first book, The Columbian Order. The Columbian Order, which inside there were speeches by Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, and many other great authors at the time. I studied that book like I was always hungry. I drank that book like I was always thirsty. Well, when I got to the age, sir, can I tell you? When I got to the age of 16 years old, quite naturally, I had grown from the age of 7 to 16. I was big and burly. Well, Master Heward told his wife, Miss Sophia, you know, there's something about that Freddie. He done been in them books and he been reading, because he don't talk like a slave anymore. Well, they sent me off to the slave breaker, Master Corvée. When I got on that plantation, I walked on that plantation as such. But every day, that master beat me. He broke a wild stallion, because when it was all said and done, I was walking like this, bent over, stripes all over my back. I knew that I was headed to death. Well, one day, Master, on a Sunday, he said, Frederick, I want you to come tomorrow morning and clean out the stall. That's after I ran from Master, because Master had beat me and I got to the point where I was tired. I met some 3 slaves out in the wood, Mr. Lawson. Mr. Lawson took me out in the woods and started digging. He came up with a rabbit foot. He said, Frederick, if you want that master to stop whipping you, take this rabbit foot and put it in your right pocket. I promise you, he won't touch you again. I said, you know what? I don't believe in that superstition. He said, all right, we'll go back and get a whipping. I said, you know what? Give me that rabbit foot. I put it in my right pocket and I went back to that plantation. I was so amazed, because when I got back there, Master Corvée treated me very kind. No whipping or anything. And he said, Frederick, tomorrow morning I want you to clean out the stalls, and which I was doing. Well, guess what? Out of nowhere he appeared, and in his hand he had a whip, and he strung that whip out, and when he strung it out, it tied around my ankle. I had strength enough to bow down and grab that whip, and I tied it around my wrist. And when I tied it around my wrist, I pulled him to me. When I pulled him to me, for 2 hours, we tussled. Now, my mission was not to beat him or to kill him, because I knew if I would have killed him, they would have strung me up. But the mission was to keep him away from me. Ladies and gentlemen, after that 2.5 hours of fighting, I got up, he stayed down. When he got up, he had nerve enough to tell me, Frederick, you better be glad I didn't whip you. Because if I would have whipped you, in my mind, I'm saying, you don't want no more of this. Move on out. That's right. He never touched me for the next 6 months that I was on that plantation. I will say to this, and I hope somebody gets something out of this. If you was a weak slave, Massa and his slave beaters would beat you. If you was a strong slave, they might say something to you, but they never touch you. I just said something to you in 2023. Moving on. Like I said, I wound up going to another plantation, Mr. Freeman's plantation, and believe it or not, he allowed us to do and have the freedom to do what we wish. Meaning that, yes, we had to go out to the fields during the day, but once we were done and the sun came down, we were allowed to do what we please. In that time, I used that time to teach other slaves how to read. Would you believe in the midst of it, there was a Judas Somebody raise your hand if you know about Judas. Judas went back and he told the slaves that Frederick, me, was out teaching the slaves. I have you know that the slave masters, they came and broke in and they whipped us and took me to jail. Don't cry. Don't say, oh, because that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Going to jail allowed me to get 3 meals, a cart, and to wash. That's right. That's right. It was a benefit. Well, Master Hugh Ward came and got me and took me back, and he said, I have a good mind to send you down to Mississippi. Ladies and gentlemen, if he would have sent me down to Mississippi, you would have never heard of Frederick Douglass. That would have been the end of me. Well, he took me back, taught me a trade. I wound up going out and working, earning my own money. Yes, my first $6 I earned, would you believe, when I came home, I had to give him the whole $6. He felt guilty. So you know what he wound up doing? He wound up paying me back some money. That's right. Are y'all ready for this? A big old gigantic penny. That's right. He gave me a penny every time I bought him $6. Well, he allowed me to go out and get another job. This time I'm making $10. Well, you know what? I took him $6 and I kept the $4 and I buried it until I made up my mind that I'm tired of being a slave. Moving on, as we are in New Bedford, because I already told you about Anna and I escaping. I was invited to an anti-slavery meeting. Sitting there, minding my business, a black man came up to me and he said, you must be Frederick Douglass. I got scared because I thought that was somebody coming to get me to take me back to slavery. He said, no, come on, go with me. We went in the back where the VIPs was, and I had the opportunity to meet Mr. William Lord Garrison. Mr. William Lord Garrison was amazed at me because of the fact, not only because of the way that I looked, but because I could handle myself with the knowledge that I had. He said, Frederick, you must have a PhD. I said, no, sir. I do not have a PhD from an educational institution. But I do have a PhD. He said, oh, you do? I said, yes. And I turned around and I took my shirt off and he saw my PhD on my back, those stripes. And he took me and he hired me to be one of his speakers at the Anti-Slavery Coalition. We traveled the whole South. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm smiling because this time I had the opportunity to reap financial rewards of $25 per speech. And you want to know something? That $25 that I reaped was mine. I didn't have to give it to anybody. So that $25, I would send it back to my wife, Anna, so she could take care of our 4 kids. Well, 1845, I wrote my first book, The Narrative and Life of Frederick Douglass. Would you believe all those white folks were talking? They didn't believe that a black man had wrote that book. They said that white people wrote that book and they just put my face on the cover. As a matter of fact, the white man, Wendell Phillips, he told me personally, he said, Frederick, take that book and throw it in the fire. That book will get you killed. Don't you know if I would have listened to him, that book never would have made its way through the life of history. I wound up selling that book 50 cents a copy. Not only that, 5,000 copies were sold. Not only that, it was written in 5 different languages around the world. The Narrative and Life of Frederick Douglass. As time went on, Mr. William Garrison himself burst in my home on a Saturday morning where Anna and I was having breakfast with the kids. And he blurted out, Frederick, you gotta leave. Why should I leave? In your book, you told on all your masters. They're gonna come and get you. As a matter of fact, Master Hugh Ward, he got his hands on that book. And he took out a full-page ad in the Boston Times saying that if you see that Frederick Douglass, capture him and bring him back. Yeah, can you imagine that? Well, the next morning they put me on a ship and I went to Canada. I stayed in Canada for 2 years, and the real reason I came back because my baby girl Anna had died from a disease. But when I came back, let me just give you an example. I know time is ticking. I'm over in England. I'm at a very conservative event. I'm sipping on wine. And the two ladies, one of them, Miss Stanton, she comes to me and she says, Frederick, I must let you know, we sent $750 to your master, Hugh Ard. We bought your freedom. I said, what? They said, yes, we bought your freedom. And they said, you don't have to go back to the States. You can stay here with us. We'll ship your family over here. But I said, no, I must go back home because there's more black people out there, over there, that need my help. Well, upon my coming back to America, I packed my family up and we went to Rochester on 2nd Avenue. Ladies and gentlemen, as an activist, and when my first newspaper came out, the North Star, sir, I went to Washington, D.C. I was not summoned, I went. And at that time, President Abraham Lincoln was the president who I campaigned for. When I got to that White House, it wasn't like now. When I got there, I made my way through the hallways and we had to stand on the stairwell. There were all white guys there. I managed to go up, I was number 4 from the top, standing on that stairwell. A white lady came out. Right away, she said, Mr. Frederick Douglass. And I said, that'll be me. She said, please, sir, follow me. As I was about to go in the door, I heard those white men talking among themselves. And I can't tell you how many of those white men, out of their mouth, the N-word came. Who do he think he is? Well, I'm gonna let you know who I was on that day. I was Frederick Douglass on my way to talk to the president while you all are standing there waiting. That's who I am. So when I walked in the Oval Office, President Abraham Lincoln stood up, all 6'4" of him. And he said, Mr. Douglass, before you sit, I must tell you, I heard you have been saying some foul things about me. I said, sir, you're right, I did. He said, have a seat. I sat down and we began to talk such as, Mr. Douglass, what can I do for you today? I said, sir, first of all, thank you very much for allowing me to come. But I have 3 things on my mind. Number 1, to allow black men to fight in the Civil War. You cannot win a war with one hand behind your back. He had one hand fighting the Civil War, that was the white soldiers. The black men was behind his back. He said the only premise is you allow us to fight, and once we fight, we come back alive, you free us. The second thing is to allow us to vote. To allow women to vote. That was the second thing. The third thing was to release my people from slavery. Mr. Abraham Lincoln, as a matter of fact, that's the 12th, 13th, and 14th Amendment. Mr. Lincoln got up and he looked out the window as if he was looking in the future. He was looking at August the 28th, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King standing on the steps at the Lincoln Memorial saying, free at last, free at last. Ladies and gentlemen, if we would have waited until 1963, that would have been 60 years to this day of 2023 that we black folks would have been freed. Mr. Lincoln turned back around and he said, Mr. Douglass, I will talk to you and we'll see what we can do. I know we will get this done. Well, I have you know, January 1, 1863, the word came. The word came while we were in church in Rochester, New York. What was the word? On this day, January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln has just signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring all black folks free. Ladies and gentlemen, a portion of us was free, but there was some that was in Galveston, Texas, that had no knowledge of the freedom. As I depart, happy Juneteenth, and let's remember our soldiers, and let's remember, we can't get along, get ahead, be in love if we fight each other. Amen. Let's come together.
Y'all give it up for Frederick Douglass.